Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Wheel of Horror. This is episode 4. If you haven't seen any of the other ones, I'll link a playlist down in the description. But basically, gonna spin the wheel. Whatever it lands on, I watch, and the person who suggests it gets a shout out. So, our suggestions are Hellraiser, It Follows, Tremors, When a Stranger Calls, Hush, Bad Moon, Lake Mungo, Birdemic, The Woman in Black, The Amityville Horror, Extremely Evil, Shockingly Wicked, and Vile, The House at the End of Time, and The Wheel of Punishment and Bad Horror. So, let's see what we're going to get. And it is going to be, well, of course, it's Hellraiser. She's been talking crap all day about, you better spend Hellraiser, you better get Hellraiser. So you get what you asked for, Julia. So, let's get to the review.
Enjoy this review, or I'll tear your soul apart.
Hellraiser was released in 1987 and was directed by Clive Barker. It stars Ashley Laurence, Clare Higgins, and Andrew Robinson, and is about a husband and wife who move into a house of the husband's brother. He's disappeared for a few years and they don't know where he is, so they end up buying the house and living there. An injury gets sustained by the father where blood starts to drip in the room, which brings back the brother's corpse, and it's like flesh and bones. And basically, he convinces Julia to bring him more blood. I struggle a little bit saying that plot because it is very weird, but this is a great movie. It was suggested by Julia. She threatened me, saying that I have to review this and that if I didn't, there would be consequences. So, of course, with my luck, this was the movie that was spun, so I don't have to suffer those consequences. But Julia, I will fight you, so sass me again and just wait. I'll tear your soul apart. Let's talk about Julia for a second. So, I let her give her opinion of it, and I'm going to flash it on the screen right here. So, I don't know what she said about it yet. All I know is that she threatened me. But, yeah, thank you for suggesting this, because this honestly is a great movie. It was made in a budget of about like $1 million, which back then was a lot, but looking at it now, this movie holds up really well. I mean, the practical effects, which were by Bob Keane, I think it is, he does a great job with these practical effects. I mean, even for the time, these were amazing. And the blood and the gore were just all, they were all perfect. I mean, there was no way they could have been made any better. He does a great job with it. And honestly, this movie surprised me with how good it was. I mean, it has a story. It has great effects. Great music underscoring to the movie. I mean, it just has really everything. There's a few negatives that we'll talk about, but let's talk about some positives. This is probably some of the best practical effects I've seen in a horror movie, done in like the 80s and even most of the 90s. I mean, Bob Keane just does a great job with it, and it was really stunning to look at it and see the characters interact with it, because a lot of times it seems a little bit weird when characters are talking to something that isn't on set and you could tell it's like a green screen or it's like someone holding up a puppet. But Julia, the wife, does an amazing job talking to this thing, talking to Frank when he's just the flesh and bones. What really makes this a great horror movie, though, is the story. I mean, it's a very weird plot. And when you're watching it, it's a little bit weird, it's a little bit uncomfortable, but you gotta go along with it a little bit. But what makes you go along with it is the character development between the main characters, which are Frank, who really doesn't have an arc, he's just more so the antagonist, but you like Frank sometimes. Julia, she has a really nice arc. Larry, you like Larry and you feel bad for Larry, which is why you keep on watching it. And also Kirsty, which is the daughter of Larry. You find out that Larry was married before and that wife passed away, and then he ends up marrying Julia. And you could tell there's a weird dynamic between Julia and Kirsty. which seems normal, I feel like, for most stepdaughter and stepmom relationships. And honestly, the growth between Kirsty and Julia is really nice. And you see the little shifts in their tones change throughout the movie until it gets to a certain point where it's the third act and everything starts going to hell, literally and mentally. Not more so mentally, but you know what I mean, emotionally, all of the different things. But it honestly, when the third act hits and everything starts going insane, that's when the movie becomes its best, but also where some of its flaws start to show, which more so aren't bad flaws with like character growth or story. It's more so with the low budget that the movie was given. Some of the effects aren't as good in the third act, and that's because apparently they had a time constraint and had to get it finished, and you could tell that they needed some more time to fix some of the effects in the end. It's hard to show it because that it's a lot of spoilers, these effects, but you just kind of have to trust me with them. But honestly, with the low budget, I mean, I really just have a lot of praise for this movie. These effects hold up really well, and I can't say it enough because when I was watching it, it looked so realistic, most of it. Where it didn't look realistic was when they would show a little bit too much, which luckily they don't do that. They show it too much maybe once in one specific scene. But other than that, Frank's prosthetic, as his character starts to get more blood and more meat on him, looks so great. And just a great job really by this whole team. I mean, I can't say it enough. This team of workers, of like the makeup artist, the special effects person, the cinematographer, Clive Barker as the director, he just does, everyone does an amazing job with this movie. And that's how it still stands today. I mean, we've seen how many movies has come up under Hellraiser. I mean, there's probably about like 11, 12, 13 that you could just flash all of them on the screen now. There's probably one there. Like, all of these movies are everywhere, and they're still coming out with them. I think the last one was made in 2017. There might have been one that was made in 2019. I'm not sure because there's so many of them. But, I mean, this movie became so iconic and created a subgenre of horror, and also created one of the most iconic horror figures, being Pinhead. It's really interesting that Clive Barker hates the name Pinhead, and he never gave him a name, but horror fans gave him a name because he became very iconic, and that's what people associated with this movie. Which, if you watch this movie, you're going to see that he's really not in it that much. And it's kind of like Friday the 13th, in that when you think about that movie, you would think that Jason would be in it more, but he's really not. But he became one of the most iconic parts of the movie, and that's kind of like with this movie. Pinhead really isn't shown that much throughout the movie. He has maybe 2 scenes that he's in, 3 scenes, but the other Cenobites, as they're called in this movie, have great practical effects. They didn't become as iconic, but they have their own names. Some of them, like the Chatterer, who definitely inspired some of the characters in the movie Silent Hill. But overall, this is just a great movie. It's a lot of fun. If you're not really into like torture-y, gory, sadomasochist stuff, then this movie definitely isn't for you. But it was a lot of fun. It's really funny to think, but Roger Ebert gave this movie a terrible review. I think he gave it a 0.5 star out of 4. I think it was. Like, he famously hated this movie. And reading the review, you could see kind of where he's coming from, which really shows how great of a critic he was, because you could agree with them with some of the points that he was saying with it. But honestly, I really enjoyed it. A lot of other people enjoy it. It gained a cult following, which a lot of these weird slasher-esque 80s movies kind of... that's really the start of where these cult followings of movies began in the horror genre. I mean, when you think about it, it probably starts at Hellraiser. You could probably look at the 70s, see a few, because I don't consider Halloween a cult classic because a lot of people love that movie. But It honestly deserves it because this was a great movie. And thank you, Julia, for suggesting it. I already know you're going to be suggesting more movies, so you have to wait your turn. You don't get a special privilege. You get a little special privilege, but still. Overall, I'll give this movie an 8.5 out of 10, and I would definitely recommend it. It's on Amazon Prime, and it's on Tubi. You're going to have to watch some ads if you watch on Tubi. If you have Amazon Prime, you get no ads, which is always a bonus. But yeah, thank you for the suggestion. Suggest more movies in the comments below. I'm always interested to see what people think of different movies. And if you've seen it, leave a comment of what you thought of it. But let's flash forward to the next review.